Abraham Lincoln's presidency was so remarkable that Lincoln himself transcended the presidency, becoming an American icon. Today, Lincoln is seen as a marble figure, a martyr, a phenomenon. Lincoln was the father of a second American Revolution and the political legacy we live with today. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yet none of this was ever Lincoln's original intent. Number 16, Abraham Lincoln, Republican, 1861 to 1865, 52 years old, from Illinois.
Lincoln was a conservative in the sense that he wanted to preserve and restore the Union as it had existed before the secession of the southern states and the beginning of the war. But the very events of the war pushed him step by step to the left toward a more radical position, which eventually became revolutionary.
Lincoln was not the great emancipator. He becomes the great emancipator, to some extent against his own intention. I think that Lincoln shows you what greatness is, really. It is the capacity to grow, to understand a situation, to change.
In Lincoln's lifetime, people either loved him or hated him. One thing they couldn't do was ignore him.
He was very magnetic. He drew people to him, young people especially. Young men who were active in politics thought of him as a god. He had a famous sense of humor. He had an amazing storehouse of anecdotes and jokes for every occasion. It would drive some people crazy, even as president. He would have a story ready that would illustrate a point.
Hidden behind the humor was a very complex man. Lincoln obsessed over matters and often suffered prolonged periods of sadness, frustration, and even despair. Campaign literature called him Honest Abe, banking on his compulsion for seeking the truth. His other nickname, the Rail Splitter, was more of a political marketing invention in the Jacksonian tradition, capitalizing on Lincoln's working-class roots to appeal to the common man.
Lincoln was very much a politician. He loved the game of politics. He played it very well.
He was an extraordinarily ambitious man, like so many politicians who rise to the top are.
From childhood, Lincoln was driven to make something of his life, to climb up out of poverty. He worked hard and relied on his wits, as he had not been blessed with good looks.
In the South, they attacked him as a scoundrelly-looking wretch, the cross between a nutmeg dealer and a horse swapper, whatever that means.
Lincoln turned his appearance into a positive by disarming people with self-deprecating humor. Once, after being called two-faced, he said, "If I were two-faced, would I be wearing this one?" Lincoln was his own best spinmeister. Once elected president, Lincoln chose a cabinet of intellectual equals, just as John F. Kennedy did a century later. In Lincoln's case, 4 of his secretaries had been his political rivals. He was a judicious delegator of authority, but he always reserved the ultimate decision for himself. Lincoln's election had been a political disaster for the Southern slave power, but his initial intention was just to halt the expansion of slavery into the Western territories.
He said, if I could save the Union without freeing a single slave, I would do that. If I could save it by freeing some and leaving others in bondage, I would do that too.
He never had anything but moral outrage about it. But he, like most anti-slavery men, felt that the way to kill it, the way to destroy the institution, was to contain it and let it suffocate from within.
Waiting for Lincoln on his first day in office was a letter from Major Robert Anderson, the commander of Fort Sumter, located on an island in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Anderson warned that without a shipment of provisions, he would have to surrender to the rebels. Lincoln had three options. He could order a surrender, an attack, or send provisions. He chose the latter.
So basically, Lincoln said to Jefferson Davis, if you let this food go in peacefully, it will be a symbolic manifestation of our sovereignty over this fort, the United States sovereignty. If you stop it, then the burden of responsibility for starting the war will be on your shoulders.
Before Lincoln's supply ships arrived, Confederate President Jefferson Davis ordered his men to attack the fort. The first shot was fired. On April 12, 1861, the Civil War had begun. The violence at Fort Sumter motivated 4 more states to join the Confederacy. 4 others remained on the fence. Fort Sumter was surrendered to the South, but Major Anderson saved the American flag that had flown above it and brought it to New York City.
They took that tattered, ripped flag. It was very much like the World Trade Center flag that was displayed all over New York in the fall of 2001. And the flag inspired people. It created flag mania, patriotic fever. In a way, without Sumter, Lincoln might not have stirred up the Union to a move that was necessary to fight to restore the Union, to preserve the Union.
By an act of shrewd calculation, Lincoln had baited the South into striking the first blow of the Civil War. Yet neither he nor Jefferson Davis anticipated what was about to unfold. It would be the first and only American presidency completely defined by war. Lincoln, who made Thanksgiving a national holiday, was also the first to pardon a turkey at Thanksgiving. He named it Jack.